Laudetur Jesus Christus, praised be Jesus Christ. Welcome to this live broadcast. The images you are seeing are coming to you live from the Citadelle de Québec, the official residence of Canada's Governor-General 𝗪𝘁𝗵𝐼. Our Holy Father has just paid a courtesy visit to the Governor-General and will now be meeting with the civil authorities and representatives of the indigenous peoples and the diplomatic corps. This is Pope Francis's fourth day of his 37th apostolic journey to Canada, which has as its motto, Walking Together. On behalf of Vatican Media and Vatican Radio, from wherever you are joining us, I would like to welcome you to this live broadcast. Some of you may be joining us through various Vatican Media channels, perhaps the Vatican Audio Live Events app or the Radio Vaticana app, the Vatican News web portal, English YouTube channel or Facebook live feed. To all of you joining us through Catholic TV, Catholic Faith Network, Shalom World Television's networks, EWTN, Salt and Light Media, Shalom TV in India, and Sunday Shalom, and to all of you picking up our shortwave radio broadcast, or those joining through local diocesan radio stations, and to the many others joining through other internet or social media platforms around the world, welcome to you all. I'm Francesca Merlo, and I'm here today with Sister Bernadette Rees.
And just to bring you up to speed with the Pope's trip so far, he flew to Edmonton in the western part of Canada on Sunday, arriving there in the morning. And his first event took place on Monday, meeting with the Indigenous peoples, the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit at 𝐵𝑆𝑗𝐻𝑆, and then later that day in the afternoon, meeting with Indigenous peoples and parishioners of Sacred Heart Church First Peoples Church in Edmonton. On Tuesday, yesterday, Pope Francis presided over Holy Mass at Commonwealth Stadium. There were about 50,000 people there. And he presided over that Mass in honor of Saints Joachim and Anne. And then later in the afternoon, he participated in a centuries-old traditional pilgrimage to Lac Sainte Anne and participated in the Liturgy of the Word. This morning, Pope Francis celebrated Mass in private and bid farewell to the personnel at St. Joseph's Seminary, where he was staying. While he was in Edmonton, he left a beautiful hand-carved statue of St. Joseph as a gift, and then flew to Quebec and arrived here about 3 in the afternoon. Now, this particular event that we're about to participate in, his courtesy visit and the meeting with civil authorities, has been postponed by about an hour because the flight that was bringing the Indigenous representatives from Edmonton was delayed.
Now, as I mentioned just before, the Holy Father has just met with the Governor-General 𝗪𝘁𝗵𝐼. There was a private meeting between the two and a presentation of the family. And in the meantime, a brief meeting took place between the Cardinal Secretary of State, Cardinal Pietro Parolin, and the Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. At the end of this private meeting, the Prime Minister joined the Pope, while the Governor-General met with Cardinal Secretary of State Pietro Parolin. Now, a bit of background on 𝗪𝘁𝗵𝐼, Canada's Governor-General. She was born in Nunavik in Quebec in 1947. She's the daughter of an Englishman, to be precise, a fur trader in the Hudson Bay Company, and an Inuk. In the 1970s, Mary Simon worked for the radio station CBC Northern Service, which is now called CBC North. She later held a series of executive positions with the Northern Quebec Inuit Association, which is now the 𝐼𝐸𝐴𝐻𝐸𝐸 Corporation, and the Inuit Tapiriit Kanatami, ITK, which was involved in negotiating the first land claims agreement in Canada. After that agreement was signed in 1975, becoming president of 𝐼𝐸𝐴𝐻𝐸𝐸, she became involved in the implementation of the James Bay and Northern Quebec Indigenous Land Claims Agreement. She also worked with the Inuit Circumpolar Council and the Arctic Council, and is a member of the Nunavut Implementation Commission and co-director and secretary of the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples. Now on the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, who was born in 1971. He is Canada's 23rd Prime Minister, son of Canadian Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau, and was born in Ottawa. He studied literature at McGill University in the capital and graduated in 1994. Before entering politics, he worked as a teacher for several years. He is president of the 𝐃𝐚𝐢𝐥𝐲 charity and a board member of the Canadian Avalanche Foundation and an advocate for youth and the environment. Prime Minister Trudeau was first elected to the Canadian Parliament in 2008. In 2013, he became leader of the Liberal Party, which in 2015 he led to victory, winning a majority government with seats in every province in the country. In 2019, he was then re-elected for a second term. Mr. Trudeau is married and has 3 children.
Now, just one more thing about Mary Simon. She is the first Indigenous Governor General for Canada to be sworn in, and that took place in 2021, just a year ago, and she also has 3 children. Now, a little bit about the place where this particular meeting is taking place. The Citadel of Quebec, the official residence of the Governor General of Canada. It's also the largest British fortress in North America, and it is located in the Old Quebec district. Of historical note, is in 1943 and 1944, the Quebec conferences took place here, at which Winston Churchill, Franklin D. Roosevelt, and William Lyon Mackenzie King discussed the strategy that they would adopt in World War II. This particular location was declared a National Historic Site of Canada in 1980, and it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site since 1985. Now, it's characteristic for the Holy Father to meet with the heads of state and authorities and civil authorities, generally the first day of his visit. However, the fact that our Holy Father first went to Edmonton shows us the purpose for why he is here. The Holy Father is here in Canada primarily to meet with the Indigenous peoples. He has called this apostolic journey a penitential pilgrimage, specifically regarding the involvement of Catholic institutions in the residential schools, and we recall his words from a few weeks ago.
Just prior to leaving during his Angelus on the 17th of July, Pope Francis said, "Next Sunday, God willing, I will leave for Canada. Therefore, I would like now to address all the inhabitants of that country. Dear brothers and sisters of Canada, as you know, I will come among you, above all, in the name of Jesus, to meet and embrace the Indigenous peoples."
And now we see here the Cardinal Secretary of State, Prayerline. And it looks like they are doing the photo op at this point. We're back outside. Yes, and here the Holy Father is on the terrace of the Citadel along with Mary Simon, the Governor General, and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. It should just be a matter of minutes before we go into the Citadel, and all three of them, we're expecting words from all three of them. And back to Pope Francis' words before leaving Rome.
Pope Francis' Angelus continued, in which he addressed the faithful in St. Peter's Square and the people of Canada, and he said, "Unfortunately, in Canada, many Christians, including some members of religious institutes, have contributed to the policies of cultural assimilation that in the past have severely harmed Native communities in various ways. For this reason, I recently received some groups in the Vatican, representatives of indigenous peoples, to whom I expressed my sorrow and solidarity for the harm they have suffered. And now I am about to embark on a penitential pilgrimage, which I hope, with God's grace, will contribute to the journey of healing and reconciliation already undertaken. I thank you in advance for all the work of preparation and for the welcome you will give me. Thank you all, and I ask you to please accompany me with your prayer."
Now, those meetings that we heard in these words from Pope Francis took place at the very end of March, and April 1st, a delegation of Indigenous elders, knowledge keepers, and survivors met with the Pope and shared their stories over 3 days, and then had a very moving audience with the Pope in which he expressed his apology. There was also a delegation led by Chief Phil Fontaine, who went to the Vatican and was met with Pope Benedict in a private audience in 2009, and it's said that also Pope Benedict expressed his anguish over what he heard about these schools.
This is the fourth papal visit to Canada. The first three were made by St. John Paul II in 1984, in 1987, and in 2002. The last papal visit actually took place exactly 20 years ago, when St. John Paul II travelled to Canada to participate in World Youth Day, which was held from July 23rd to July 28th, 2002. Now, while this is the first visit to Canada as Pope, several years prior to his election as Pope Francis, as the successor of Peter, Cardinal Jorge Bergoglio visited Canada and precisely Quebec City to speak at the International Eucharistic Congress in June 2008. Now, recognizing his advanced age, he is now 85 years old, and his physical limitations, as I'm sure we can see, Pope Francis is expected to use a wheelchair throughout his visit to Canada, and he is expected to limit public appearances to no more than 60 to 90 minutes. Now, unfortunately, an apostolic journey to Congo and South Sudan, which was scheduled for earlier this month, was cancelled just a few weeks prior to his trip for these reasons. His last journey abroad was to Malta, which was held between April 2nd and April 3rd of this year, 2022. Pope Francis, on his papal flight to Canada on the 24th, remembered and praised grandparents as the Church observed on Sunday the Second World Day for Grandparents and the Elderly. And now we move into the hall, and we can see here the cardinals.
The one who just stood up is Cardinal Thomas Collins from the Archdiocese of Toronto. Here we see him, probably very well known to some of these people here. Generally, and here the gentleman just standing up also came, I believe, to meet with the Pope. Gerald Antoine, a regional chief representing the Assembly of First Nations.
The hall that we are in the Citadel de Québec, holds about 100 people at the moment, between members of the civil society and representatives of the indigenous populations and the diplomatic corps.
and the fact that there are representatives of the indigenous peoples here as well, another indication that it is primarily to meet with them that the Pope is here. I did see Mr. Nathan Obed, who's the president of the Inuit, here among the assembly. So everyone here waiting, just as we are, for the entrance of the Holy Father, which should be pretty quickly following here, since we did see the photo op, which usually indicates that the Pope is about to arrive. One other interesting piece of information regarding Mary Simon is that in 2008, she was the one who accepted the former apology offered by former Prime Minister Stephen Harper to the residential school survivors and all Indigenous people in Canada. We need to remind ourselves that it was a government program that led to the assimilation of the Indigenous peoples, and the Catholic institutions as educational institutions were involved with this assimilation process. We now see Cardinals Cherny and Olay, both the prefects of Vatican dicasteries, Cardinal Olay, the dicastery for bishops, and Cardinal Cherny, the prefect of the dicastery for integral human development, both originally from Canada. And they traveled here as part of the papal entourage.
Now, we unfortunately can't see it here on the screen, but it is worth speaking a little bit about the logo which was designed for this apostolic journey. Walking together is the motto of the journey, and the logo holds that message very clearly. As its detailed program was launched on the 23rd of June, the Papal Visit team unveiled the official logo of the Papal Visit to Canada. And the logo illustrates the Walking Together theme, which is the work of an incredibly talented Indigenous artist, Sean Vincent. Now, he said himself, "My creative process is inspired by nature, particularly in my family's land in St. Laurent, Manitoba, a Métis community where I ground myself and am reminded where and who I come from, often with a dose of humility and always with good humor." Sean Vincent, the owner of the Winnipeg-based Vincent design firm, was contacted by the Papal Visit team in early 2022. After some lengthy discernment, talking with elders and family members, he made the decision to participate in creating the visuals for the historic visit of Pope Francis to Canada. Now, he explained that for this logo, community was at the heart of what I wanted to portray, with the caribou and bison herds, the fish and the eagles, with the dove of peace and the keys of St. Peter, representing the Holy Spirit and the Pope, set among the animals and elements of earth, sky and water. Wherever we go on this journey of healing and reconciliation, we go together, explained Sean Vincent.
And throughout this journey, we've seen how the Indigenous culture and their spirituality have been brought to the fore in the liturgy, especially at Lac Sainte Anne. Yesterday, we've been hearing the drums singing, the fiddlers from the Métis tradition. And all of this has helped us come to understand their own tradition. Our Holy Father even making reference to some of these traditions in his discourses so far. We've also heard a very clear apology from Pope Francis. The two words he often uses when speaking about the participation of Catholics in the residential school systems is shame and deep sorrow, indignation.
With regards to the merging of the traditions, the church tradition and the indigenous traditions, one of the people instrumental in the creation of the liturgies for this journey was Father 𝗵𝗿, who told us in an interview that he really wanted people to take note of the vestures that will be worn. He explained that these vestures were carefully prepared with indigenous art in mind, so as to both signal an affirmation of and the valuing of that distinctive art form, while also using it to convey a message of faith, so that we hope we also will become clear and then to be seen among those who are participating in distinctive garb.
Je m'appelle Nathalie Bhawan et je suis directrice des communications ici à 𝐷𝗿𝗏 et je serai votre maître des cérémonies. C'est un honneur d'être ici parmi vous aujourd'hui. Notre photographe officiel prendra des photos qui seront partagées avec vous dans les jours à venir. Je vous demande donc de ne pas prendre des photos ou des vidéos pendant la cérémonie. Maintenant, veuillez s'il vous plaît vous assurer que vos téléphones sont éteints.
The Director of Communications and Master of Ceremonies is greeting everyone, asking everyone to please turn off their telephones.
Nous avons des travailleurs de soutien en santé mentale prêts à aider les invités qui en ont besoin. Avant de commencer, j'aimerais présenter M. Alexandre McKenzie.
She is saying that there will be help for any of the guests who may need it in any form.
Et son Excellence. Merci à tous. Hello and welcome to the Citadel. My name is Nathalie Bhawan. I'm Director of Communications at Rideau Hall, and I'll be your Masters of Ceremony. It's an honor to be here with you today. As our official photographer will be taking photos, which will be shared with you in the coming days, I would ask that you not take any photos or videos during the ceremony. At this time, I would also ask that you ensure that your cell phones are turned off. We understand that today might be difficult for some guests, and please note that we have some mental health support workers ready to assist guests in need of support. I would now like to introduce Alexandre McKenzie from 𝗪𝗫𝗁 to play drum as we welcome His Holiness and Her Excellency. Thank you. Je vous invite à vous lever, si vous le pouvez, pour accueillir Sa Sainteté, le Pape François, leurs Excellences et le Premier ministre. I invite you to please rise, if you are able, and welcome His Holiness, Pope Francis, their Excellencies, and the Prime Minister.
𝐃𝐚𝐢𝐥𝐲, the 𝗪𝗿𝗿𝗿𝗁 𝗪𝗿𝗿𝗿𝗁.
Thank you, everyone. I'd like to welcome everybody here, the Prime Minister, Pope Francis.
𝐃𝐚𝐢𝐥𝐲 and New Year in no.
People stay alive. I welcome you.
𝐃𝐚𝐢𝐥𝐲. Badno badno, wan besich, anwa mamu mutem stanano, tichi wajabendaya, tichi wi mamu, wawit mauchewan in miwan mo hawas ke mo hen miwan.
I'd just like to ask everybody to remember our people that have passed.
Panduan dia chi paywa justed mam den mawatanan waset, nanan ko kagata kastede, change ji hen miwatas kasgan.
Today I'd like to remember the children that has passed, that did not come home, and I would like to pray for the survivors.
Nishkomadno, merci beaucoup, mutmechu.
Thank you.
Veuillez vous asseoir. Please be seated. Au nom de leurs excellences, la très honorable 𝗪𝘁𝐵𝐺𝐻 et M. 𝗪𝘁𝗰𝐵, je vous souhaite la bienvenue à cette cérémonie. On behalf of their excellencies, the Right Honorable 𝗪𝘁𝐵𝐺𝐻 and Mr. 𝗪𝘁𝗰𝐵, I welcome you to this ceremony. Just prior to the beginning of the ceremony, a traditional Inuit lamp known as the 𝐾𝐚𝐢𝐥𝐲 was lit to mark this important day. Traditionally, the 𝐾𝐚𝐢𝐥𝐲 was lit by Inuit women to bring warmth and light to their home. Today, we are grateful for 𝗕𝗵𝘄𝐵𝐵𝐵𝐵 from Nunavut, who will tend the 𝐾𝐚𝐢𝐥𝐲 throughout the ceremony. Nous allumons le 𝐾𝐚𝐢𝐥𝐲, la lampe traditionnelle inuite, lors d'événements importants comme la cérémonie d'aujourd'hui. Cette lampe est utilisée dans le Nord pour apporter lumière et chaleur à la demeure. 𝗓𝐾𝐚𝐢𝐥. Pour commencer, j'aimerais inviter l'aîné 𝗪𝗏𝗪𝗏 de la Première Nation Huron-Wendat à prononcer des mots de bienvenue. I would like to invite Elder 𝗪𝗏𝗪𝗏 of the Huron-Wendat First Nations to offer words of welcome.
On va rester assis. Par contre, je vais vous demander quelque chose de spécial. Vous savez, avec la pandémie qui s'est passée, il y a beaucoup de choses qui ont changé dans nos cérémonies. Et on n'a pas eu le choix de s'adapter. Et j'aimerais ça que quand je vais commencer à allumer la sauge et faire mon lien avec les 4 directions. Et avant, je vais aller porter au pape François un foin d'odeur et une plume de dinde sauvage qui est un animal de survie pour les Wendat sur le territoire. Donc, je vais remettre cette plume et ce foin d'odeur. Le foin d'odeur, c'est... il va servir le pape pour la... Il va purifier par l'odorat. Donc, je sais que le pape François a un peu de misère avec la fumée, donc on a beaucoup de façons de faire une cérémonie et de s'adapter. Et je pense que c'est important que le pape François reçoive ce foin d'odeur-là et cette plume-là pour participer en même temps au smudge aux 4 directions. Avant, je vais me présenter en Wendat et 𝗪𝗏𝗪𝗏𝗪𝗏𝗪𝗏𝗪𝗏𝗪𝗏𝗪𝗏𝗪𝗏𝗪𝗏𝗪𝗏𝗪𝗏𝗪𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 𝐷𝐴𝐷𝐿𝐷𝐴𝐷𝐿𝐷𝐴𝐷𝐴𝐷𝐴𝐷𝐴𝐷𝐴𝐷𝐴𝐷𝐴𝐷𝐴𝐷𝐴𝐷𝐴𝐷𝐴𝐷𝐴𝐷𝐴𝐷𝐴𝐷𝐴𝐷𝐴𝐷𝐴𝐷𝐴𝐷𝐴𝐷𝐴𝐷𝐴𝐷𝐴𝐷𝐴𝐷𝐴𝐷𝐴𝐷𝐴𝐷𝐴𝐷𝐴𝐷𝐴𝐷𝐴𝐷𝐴𝐷𝐴𝐷𝐴𝐷𝐴𝐷𝐴𝐷𝐴𝐷𝐴𝐷𝐴𝐷𝐴𝐷𝐴𝐷𝐴𝐷𝐴𝐷𝐴 𝐃𝐚𝐢𝐥𝐲. �W𝐴NDI Ça fait pas longtemps que j'ai réappris ma langue. Je ne le sais pas au complet, mais le v'là de me présenter, pour moi, c'est beaucoup. Parce que quand que je me présente en ma langue, je parle pas juste à mon nom, mais au nom de tout.
In case there is no translation later, this indigenous leader is offering feathers to the Holy Father, which represent the four dimensions, north, east, south, and west. And he also spoke about how he has only recently relearned his native language. And this is a very important feather, he says, for our nation. And this, he says, smells very good.
faut la sortir en même temps que la purification. Et
And he asks that they be brought out together at the same time.
voyez,
And the Holy Father also gave the indigenous leader a gift, although we do not know what it was.
Et on va faire un cercle virtuel.
A rosary.
Vous savez, avec la pandémie, via les petits vidéos là, qu'on se sert, je m'étais aperçu que même si on n'est pas en présentiel, on peut faire des choses à partir de l'esprit. Et on va ouvrir un cercle ici, aujourd'hui, à partir de l'esprit. Et à partir de ce cercle, on va visualiser un feu sacré. Parce que le feu sacré unit tout ce qui existe dans la création.
The sacred fire
Donc, on va
unites
mettre du tabac
all
virtuel aussi dans ce feu.
members of creation.
Et en même temps, on va honorer les 4 éléments vitaux, l'eau, le feu, l'air, la terre.
And we are now honoring
honorer aussi,
water, fire,
l'aspect,
earth,
Minéral, végétal
and wind,
et humain.
and every state, human, vegetable.
Je vais demander à la direction de l'Est d'ouvrir sa porte pour qu'on puisse avoir accès à cette direction. Je vais demander à la direction du Sud d'ouvrir cette
He is
porte
asking
aussi
that each
pour avoir
direction,
accès à cette direction.
north, open its doors so that we may have access to it. South may open its doors so we have access
La
to
porte des
it.
grands-mères. On va
West
honorer la direction du Nord. La
is being
direction,
honored as the direction for
mais aussi,
grandmothers,
je mets toujours une direction
and north
spéciale,
as the direction of grandfathers,
parce qu'ils sont une minorité dans une minorité.
and
Des
a
fois, on a
special door
tendance
for
à
the
les oublier, mais
Inuits,
c'est important qu'on
who are a
pense à ça.
minority within a
Et je
minority.
suis content qu'elle a commencé avec le Kulik, que je connais aussi. Donc, c'est un honneur d'avoir les Inuits et d'avoir cette culture-là aussi en même temps.
It is also an honor to have the Inuits and their
Et je
culture
vais
among
ouvrir
us.
les 4 directions. Je vais prendre mon sifflet 4 fois. C'est un os de dinde sauvage que j'ai eu.
And he is going to blow into his whistle, which is made out of a bone, 4 times to represent these 4 directions. He asks that we each place our hands on our
Le
hearts.
cœur, ça peut servir de bâton de parole en même temps. Mais c'est là que le Créateur a mis la sagesse aux humains.
The heart is what gives wisdom to humankind.
Ce geste important du cœur, de justement aller se connecter à cette sagesse-là.
And it is important that we connect with the wisdom that it gives us.
Je demande à la grand-mère de l'Ouest de nous rendre accès au grand cercle sacré en haut des esprits.
He asks that the West gives us access to the great circles above.
Et plus fort ensemble. Tiens, ouais.
Together we are stronger, he says.
Tiens, ouais, grand-père, grand-père François. Oh. Merci.
And directs the salutation to the Holy Father.
J'aimerais maintenant inviter le très honorable Justin Trudeau à prononcer quelques mots. I now invite the Right Honorable Justin Trudeau to say a few words.
Chers aînés, Raymond, Vivi, dirigeants autochtones, le très Saint-Père,
Indigenous leaders,
Premier ministre
Most
Legault,
Holy Father, Excellencies, I am very pleased to be with you today and to be able to say a few words of introduction. I would like to begin by thanking the First Nations who have occupied this territory for millennia for their welcome to the traditional and treaty territory.
As we welcome His Holiness this week, it's important to reflect on the significance of this moment for survivors, for Indigenous peoples, and indeed for all Canadians. Hier, le 26 juillet,
Yesterday, the 26th of July, was the feast of Saint Anne.
c'est une figure importante.
Saint Anne is an important figure for Catholics.
L'amour maternel.
She represents maternal
Elle
love,
représente aussi la famille.
and she also represents the family.
C'est nos racines.
The family
C'est
is
ce qui
our
nous aide
roots.
à grandir,
It is what
et à
helps us to
découvrir le
grow
monde.
and to discover the
La
world.
famille, c'est la première chose qui a été enlevée aux enfants.
And family is the
Envoyés
first
dans les
thing that was
pensionnats.
taken away from the children who were sent to
Quand j'ai
residential
visité
schools.
𝐃𝐚𝐢𝐥𝐲, 𝐾𝐴
When I visited
Quand
𝐃𝐚𝐢𝐥𝐿,
je parle
𝐾𝐴
avec
and
les
Williams
survivants
Lake,
et avec les familles,
when I talk with the survivors and with their families,
et je pense aussi aux parents.
I think of the children
As a
and I
dad,
think of the parents too.
I can't imagine my kids being taken away. When my kids are crying, I can console them. When they're happy, I can share that feeling of joy with them, of accomplishment. But in residential schools, these children were alone and isolated in their pain and sorrow, far from their families and communities, and even worse, stripped of their language, their culture, their identity. Une solitude profonde, une perte non seulement de famille,
A deep loneliness, a loss not only of family and community, but of their language, their culture and their
Depuis
identity.
la publication en 2015 du rapport final de
Since
la
the release
Commission
of the
de
final
vérité
report
et
of the Truth and
réconciliation,
Reconciliation Commission in
Premières Nations,
2015,
les Inuits et les
First
Métis
Nations,
demandent au
Inuit
pape de
and
présenter
Métis
des
have been
excuses aux
calling on the
survivants,
Pope
à leurs
to
familles
apologize to
et aux
survivors,
communautés.
their families and
Des
communities.
excuses pour le rôle que l'Église catholique
An apology
romaine
for the
comme
role that the
institution
Roman Catholic
a
Church,
joué
as an
dans les
institution,
mauvais traitements
played
sur les plans
in the
spirituel,
spiritual,
culturel,
cultural,
émotionnel,
emotional,
physique et sexuel
physical, and
que les
sexual
enfants
abuse
autochtones ont subi dans les pensionnats.
that Indigenous
dirigés
children
par
suffered
l'Église.
in the church-run residential schools.
L'événement de cette semaine à 𝐾𝐚𝐢𝐥𝐲
This
n'aurait
week's
pas été
event at
possible sans
𝐾𝐚𝐢𝐥𝐲
le courage
would not have
et
been
la
possible without the
persévérance
courage and
des
perseverance of the
qui ont
survivors
partagé leurs
who
souvenirs
shared
douloureux
their painful
et
memories
raconté leurs expériences, incluant directement
and who
au
told their
Saint-Père
experiences, including directly to the
Holiness.
Holy Father
In our
himself.
previous conversations, from the first time we spoke about this, you always offered your time, genuinely seeking to understand, to do right, and to atone. This week, you recognized the abuses experienced at residential schools that resulted in cultural destruction, loss of life, and ongoing traumas lived by Indigenous peoples in every region of the country. As Your Holiness has said, begging pardon is not the end of the matter. It is a starting point, a first step. On Monday morning, I was sitting with survivors, and I felt their reaction to your apology. Each will take from it what they need, but there's no doubt that you had an enormous impact. Survivors and their descendants need to be at the center of everything we do going forward. In April, Dene National Chief Gerald Antoine was at the Vatican, and he compared the moment to the experience of walking through the snow and seeing fresh moose tracks. It was a feeling of hope. Today, I want to say, let's all continue our work together to keep this hope alive. Quand je suis allé au Vatican il y a 5 ans maintenant,
When I went to the
j'y étais
Vatican
pour
5
aborder
years
le
ago,
sujet des pensionnats et de la réconciliation.
I was there to
avec
discuss
votre
residential
sainteté.
schools and
Et je sais que
reconciliation
votre
with His
présence
Holiness.
ici cette semaine
And I know that your presence here this week would not have been possible without your personal convictions and your integrity. Thank you for coming with an open heart. We are all aware that the residential school system attempted to assimilate indigenous children. Today, indigenous people continue to fight, to defend and to preserve their culture and languages. The traditional gathering that took place in 𝐷𝗫𝐿 is a very good example of this. Reconciliation is the responsibility of us all. It is our responsibility to see our differences, not as an obstacle, but as an opportunity to learn, to understand each other better, and to take action.
Our Governor General talks often about how reconciliation is not a single act, but a lifetime journey of healing. This journey is different for everyone. I spoke about Saint Anne being a symbol of maternal love and family, but Saint Anne is also a symbol of healing. Tomorrow, Your Holiness will visit Saint Anne de Beaupré. Pilgrims have been traveling there for centuries to pray and to ask Saint Anne to help them heal. So in the spirit of healing, let us never give up. Canadians, institutions, let us continue our work together with Indigenous peoples until we reach a better future for everyone. Merci. Thank you. Gracias. 𝐃𝐚𝐢𝐥𝐲.
Merci, Monsieur le Premier ministre. Thank you, Prime Minister. J'invite Son Excellence, la très honorable 𝗪𝗫𝐿, gouverneure générale du Canada, à prendre la parole. I would now ask the Governor General, Her Excellency, the Right Honourable 𝗪𝗫𝐿, to offer her address.
Bonjour. Hello and good afternoon. Unusakut Kwe. Votre sainteté, je vous souhaite la bienvenue à la citadelle. Welcome, Your Holiness, to the Citadel of Quebec. My husband, Whit, and I are honored to welcome you and to be joined by survivors, elders, leaders, knowledge keepers, diplomats, dignitaries, former commissioners of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and all of those watching from coast to coast to coast. I want to thank the First Nations who have occupied this territory for millennia for welcoming me to their traditional and treaty lands. Peu importe de vous nous écoutez présentement.
Regardless of where you are listening from, either here at the Citadel or elsewhere in Canada, you are on Indigenous land. It is important to acknowledge this.
Your Holiness, thank you for making this visit to Canada on what you have called your pilgrimage of penance. We gather at this historic citadel where stories are shared and ideas are exchanged. With this visit, you're signaling to the world that you and the Roman Catholic Church are joining us on our path of reconciliation, healing, hope, and renewal. It began in 𝗪𝗁𝗁, where we witnessed two realities. The first was the hurt and pain of survivors, communities of people who suffered for decades, Indigenous peoples forced to live with policies meant to strip away their cultures, languages, and spiritual beliefs and practices. Survivors who every day carry the trauma of their residential school experience. But these people, these survivors, they defy definition. They are parents who defended their children when no one else would. They are advocates who fought and are still fighting for their languages and cultures so that they can thrive for generations to come. They are artists who are channeling their stories through their music, dance, cultures, and language. They are all proud. They are all strong. Your Holiness, they came to hear what you had to say with hearts and minds open, some willing to forgive, some still living with the hurt, but all willing to listen. Everyone hoping to further their healing journey. Les peuples autochtones ont montré au monde
Indigenous peoples showed the world and continue to show us that despite the challenges they may face, they will face it with dignity and great resolve.
I acknowledge and applaud what has been achieved, what Indigenous communities have achieved with this week's visit. It is Indigenous peoples who worked, waited, and prayed for an apology on Indigenous lands in Canada. They never gave up. We must remember that it is because of their courage and resilience that we are here today. Your Holiness, their efforts make Canada a stronger nation.
They never gave up, and we must remember it is their courage and resilience that made it happen. Their efforts, Your Holiness, make Canada a stronger nation.
It is our collective duty to remember what happened at residential schools, to tell the stories of survivors and of those who never made it home, and to support and care for those who did. Support in terms of mental health resources, helping families discover the true fate of those who never made it home, and care for Indigenous peoples who need the time and space to process what this visit means to them and what the next step should be. As you indicated, Your Holiness, this is an important step towards further dialogue and actions that will lead to real reconciliation. Indeed, we look forward to hearing more of the Church's future actions to continue this essential work. On Monday, you visited the Sacred Heart Church of the First Peoples in Edmonton. There, you said that reconciliation is a grace that must be sought. To that, I would also add that reconciliation is a grace that must be earned through continuous hard work and understanding. That work falls to each and every one of us, our sacred responsibility. Il y a un temps pour toutes choses.
There is a time for everything. We are ready.
In Canada, there has been a monumental shift in our thinking. Now is the time in our country's history and consciousness for reconciliation. As we address this issue and the future health and well-being of Indigenous communities, I put my faith in each of us to encourage healing. In Inuktitut, to heal, Mamisarnek. Mamisarnek is a journey, not a destination. It takes time. It begins slowly, softly, and carefully. It follows its own path, carrying us forward, but also in many other directions. En Inuktitut, guérir et Mamisarnek.
The Governor General is now repeating in French what she just said in English.
Il faut du temps. Ça commence lentement, doucement, prudemment. la guérison suit son propre chemin, nous fait avancer, mais nous mène aussi dans de nombreuses autres directions. Eventually, healing takes us beyond powerlessness or anger or pain. It takes us beyond trauma. It renews our mental, spiritual, and physical health. I've seen this in action. I've seen healing through art, through community, through kindness, through generosity, through the revitalization of language, culture, and identity. Your Holiness, long after you leave Canada, I know you will continue listening and learning not only about the struggles and pains of these communities, but also about the pride they feel to be Indigenous, their resilience, and how they contribute to Canada and the world. Take these stories back with you, share them widely, and continue to find ways to work together to extend a hand to heal our communities. I have great hope in what I have seen so far during this visit. Canada looks forward to working with the Holy See on reconciliation, as well as many other pressing global issues such as promoting peace and education, breaking down barriers, fighting poverty and disease, and rebuilding trust. Thank you for your efforts. And thank you to all Canadians for hearing and responding to the call for reconciliation. Merci à tous les Canadiens d'avoir entendu et répondu à l'appel à la réconciliation. Kanata miulimanik nakokmehunga tusagun nakatsi nalahat takatsilu tamanna katipaliagia hagnibut nunaktuamingo hatigitsutapichutigilugu. Your Holiness, I wish you the very best on your journey. May the Creator bless us all. Merci, miigwech nakokmik hoyanamik.
Thank you, Excellency. I would now invite His Holiness Pope Francis to share his address. J'invite maintenant Sa Sainteté, le Pape François, à prendre la parole.
Señora Gobernadora General, Señor Primer Ministro,
Madam Governor General, Mr. Prime Minister, distinguished civil and religious authorities, esteemed representatives of the indigenous peoples, honorable members of the diplomatic corps, ladies and gentlemen. I cordially greet you, and I thank Her Excellency, the Right Honourable Mary Simon, and His Excellency Justin Trudeau for their kind words. I am happy to be able to address you who have the responsibility of serving the people of this great country that from sea to sea displays an extraordinary natural heritage. Among its many beauties, I think of the immense and spectacular maple forests that make the Canadian countryside uniquely colourful and variegated. I would like to take as my starting point the symbol par excellence of these lands, the maple leaf which, starting from the seal of Quebec, rapidly spread to become the emblem that appears on the national flag. That development took place in relatively recent times, but the maple trees preserve the memory of many past generations, going back well before the colonists arrived on Canadian soil. The native peoples extracted maple sap, with which they concocted wholesome and healthy syrups. This makes us think of their industriousness and their constant concern to protect the land and the environment in fidelity to a harmonious vision of creation, as an open book that teaches human beings to love the Creator and to live in symbiosis with other living creatures. We can learn much from this ability to listen attentively to God, to people, and to nature. And we need it especially amid the dizzying and frenzied pace of today's world, marked by a constant rapidification, which makes difficult a truly human, sustainable, and integral development, and ends up creating a society of weariness and disillusionment, which finds it hard to recover the taste for contemplation, authentic relationships, and the mystique of togetherness. How much do we need to listen to and dialogue with one another in order to step back from the prevailing individualism, from hasty judgments, widespread aggressiveness, and the temptation to divide the world into good people and bad people. The large size of the maple leaves, which absorb polluted air and in turn give out oxygen, invite us to marvel at the beauty of creation and to appreciate the wholesome values present in the indigenous cultures. They are an inspiration to us all and can help to heal harmful tendencies to exploitation. Exploiting relationships and basing human activity solely on what proves useful and profitable. These vital teachings, however, were violently opposed in the past. I think above all of the policies of assimilation and enfranchisement, also involving the residential school systems, which harmed many indigenous families by undermining their language, culture, and their view of the world. In that deplorable system promoted by the governmental authorities of the time, which separated so many children from their families, different local Catholic institutions had a part in. For this reason I express my deep shame and sorrow, and together with the bishops of this country, I renew my request for forgiveness for the wrong done by so many Christians to the indigenous peoples. For all of this, I ask for forgiveness. It is tragic when some believers, as happened in that period of history, conform themselves to the conventions of the world rather than to the gospel. The Christian faith has played an essential role in shaping the highest ideals of Canada, characterized by the desire to build a better country for all its people. At the same time, it is necessary in admitting our faults to work together to accomplish a goal that I know all of you share, to promote the legitimate rights of the native populations and to favor processes of healing and reconciliation between them and the non-indigenous people of the country. That is reflected in the commitment to respond in a fitting way to the appeals of the Commission for Truth and Reconciliation, as well as in the concern to acknowledge the rights of the native peoples. The Holy See and the local Catholic communities are concretely committed to promoting the indigenous cultures through specific spiritual and appropriate forms of spiritual accompaniment that include attention to their cultural traditions, their customs, their languages and educational processes in the spirit of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. It is our desire to renew the relationship between the Church and the indigenous peoples of Canada, a relationship marked both by a love that has borne outstanding fruit and tragically deep wounds that we are committed to understanding and healing. I am truly grateful to have encountered and listened to various representatives of the indigenous peoples in recent months in Rome, and to be able here in Canada to renew the good relations established there.
Los momentos que vivimos juntos han dejado en mí una huella.
The time we spent together made an impression on me and left a firm desire to respond to the indignation and shame for the sufferings endured by the indigenous peoples, and to move forward on a fraternal and patient journey with all Canadians, in accordance with truth and justice, working for healing and reconciliation, and constantly inspired by hope. That history of suffering and contempt, the fruit of the colonizing mentality, does not heal easily. It should make us realize that colonization has not ended. In many places it has been transformed, disguised and concealed. This is the case with forms of ideological colonization. In the past, the colonialist mentality disregarded the concrete life of people and imposed certain predetermined cultural models. Yet today, too, there are any number of forms of ideological colonization that clash with the reality of life, stifle the natural attachment of peoples to their values, and attempt to uproot their traditions, their history and religious ties. This mentality, presumptuously thinking that the dark pages of history have been left behind, becomes open to the cancel culture that would judge the past purely on the basis of certain contemporary categories. The result is a cultural fashion that levels everything out, makes everything equal, proves intolerant of differences, and concentrates on the present moment, on the needs and rights of individuals, while frequently neglecting their duties with regard to the most weak and vulnerable of our brothers and sisters, the poor, migrants, the elderly, the sick, the unborn. They are the forgotten ones in affluent societies. They are the ones who, amid general indifference, are cast aside like dried leaves to be burnt. Instead, the rich, multicolored foliage of the maple tree reminds us of the importance of the whole, the importance of developing human communities that are not blandly uniform, but truly open and inclusive. And just as every leaf is fundamental for the luxuriant foliage of the branches, so each family, as the essential cell of society, is to be given its due, because the future of humanity passes through the family. The family is the first concrete social reality, yet it is threatened by many factors, like domestic violence, the frenetic pace of labor, an individualistic mindset, cutthroat careerism, unemployment, the loneliness and isolation of young people, the abandonment of the elderly and the ill. The indigenous peoples have much to teach us about care and protection for the family. Among them, from an early age, children learn to recognize right from wrong, to be truthful, to share, to correct mistakes, to begin anew, to comfort one another and to be reconciled. May the wrongs that were endured by the indigenous peoples serve us as a warning less concern for the family and its rights be neglected for the sake of greater productivity and individual interests. Let us return to the maple leaf. In wartime, soldiers used those leaves for bandages and for soothing wounds. Today, before the senseless folly of war, we have once again need to heal forms of hostility and extremism, and to cure the wounds of hatred. A witness of tragic acts of violence in the past recently observed that peace has its own secret: never to hate anyone. If we want to live, we must never hate. We have no need to divide the world into friends and enemies, to create distances and once again to arm ourselves to the teeth. An arms race of strategies of deterrence will not bring peace and security. We need to ask ourselves not how to pursue wars, but how to stop them, and to prevent entire peoples from once more being held hostage and in the grip of terrible and protracted Cold Wars. What we need are creative and far-sighted policies, capable of moving beyond the categories of opposition in order to provide answers to global challenges. In fact, the great challenges of our day, like peace, climate change, the effects of the pandemic, and international migration movements, all have one thing in common: they are global. They are global challenges. They regard everyone. And since all of them speak of the need to consider the whole, politics cannot remain imprisoned in partisan interests. We need to be able to look, as the indigenous wisdom tradition teaches, 7 generations ahead, and not to our immediate convenience, to the next elections, or the support of this or that lobby. But we need also to appreciate the yearning of young people for fraternity, justice, and peace. In order to preserve memory and wisdom, we need to listen to the elderly. But in order to press forward towards the future, we also need to embrace the dreams of young people. They deserve a better future than the one we are preparing for them. They deserve to be involved in decisions about the building of the world of today and tomorrow, and particularly about the protection of our common home. In this regard, the values and teachings of the indigenous peoples are precious. Here I would like to express appreciation for the praiseworthy commitment being laid on the local level to protecting the environment. It could even be said that the symbols drawn from nature, such as the 𝗪𝗪 in the flag of this province of Quebec, and the maple leaf in that of the country, confirm Canada's ecological vocation.
Cuando la comisión correspondiente evaluó
When the Commission for the Creation of the National Flag set about evaluating the thousands of sketches submitted for that purpose, many of them by ordinary people, it proved surprising that almost all of them contained the image of the maple leaf. The convergence around this shared symbol leads me to bring up an essential word for all Canadians: multiculturalism. Multiculturalism is fundamental for the cohesiveness of a society as diverse as the dappled colors of the foliage of the maple trees. With its multiple points and sides, the maple leaf reminds us of a polyhedron. It tells us that you are people capable of inclusion, such that new arrivals can find a place in that multiform unity and make their own original contribution to it. Multiculturalism is a permanent challenge. It involves accepting and embracing all the different elements present, while at the same time respecting the diverse traditions and cultures, and never thinking that the process is complete. In this regard, I express my appreciation for the generosity shown in accepting many Ukrainian and Afghan migrants. Yet there is also a need to move beyond the rhetoric of fear with regard to immigrants and to give them, according to the possibilities of the country, the concrete opportunity to become involved responsibly in society. For this to happen, rights and democracy are indispensable. But it is also necessary to confront the individualistic mindset and to remember that life in common is based on presuppositions that the political system cannot produce on its own. Here too, the indigenous culture is of great help in recalling the importance of social values. The Catholic Church also, with its universal dimension, its concern for the most vulnerable, its rightful service to human life at every moment of its existence, from conception to natural death, is happy to offer its specific contribution. In these last few days, I have heard about the many needy persons who come knocking on the doors of parishes. Even in a country as developed and prosperous as Canada, which pays great attention to social assistance, there are many homeless persons who turn to churches and food banks to receive essential help in meeting their needs, which, lest we forget, are not only material. These brothers and sisters of ours spur us to reflect on the urgent need for efforts to remedy the radical injustice that taints our world, in which the abundance of gifts of creation is unequally distributed. It is scandalous that the well-being generated by economic development does not benefit all the sectors of society. And it is indeed sad that precisely among the native peoples we often find many indices of poverty, along with other negative indicators, such as the low percentage of schooling and less than easy access to owning a home and to healthcare. May the emblem of the maple leaf, which regularly appears on the labels of the country's products, serve as an incentive to everyone to make economic and social decisions that foster participation and care for those in need. It is only by working in common accord, hand in hand, that today's pressing challenges must be faced. I thank you for your hospitality, your attention, and your respect. And with great affection, I assure you that Canada and its people are truly close to my heart.
Thank you, Your Holiness. Au nom de leurs excellences, je tiens à vous remercier tous pour votre présence aujourd'hui. Pour terminer la cérémonie, les violonistes métis Alicia et Liam Bloor, frères et sœurs de Toronto, nous accompagnent pour le départ de la délégation officielle. On behalf of their excellencies, I want to thank you for attending today's gathering. As the official party departs, they will be accompanied by Métis fiddling duo Alicia and Liam Bloor, siblings from Toronto. Thank you. Merci. 𝗪𝗁𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏
as we hear this music, Pope Francis has signed the Book of Honor. He signed in Spanish and wrote, "Pilgrim in Canada, land which extends from sea to sea. I pray to God that this great country may always be an example for the construction of a future which looks after and values its roots, in particular for the indigenous peoples, and may the country always be a home that welcomes everyone." And this ends the live broadcast from the Citadelle de Québec in Canada, where Pope Francis has paid a courtesy call to 𝗪𝘁𝗵, Canada's Governor General, and has met with civil authorities, representatives of Indigenous peoples, and members of the diplomatic corps on this fourth day of his 37th apostolic journey to Canada, which has as its motto, "Walking Together." From here, Pope Francis will be driven to the Archbishop's residence and will dine in private. Tomorrow morning, Pope Francis celebrates Holy Mass at 10 a.m. local Eastern Time in the National Shrine of St. Anne de Beaupré for reconciliation. Please visit the Vatican News web portal, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter and YouTube accounts for coverage of today's events and other Vatican and world news. On behalf of Vatican Media, I would like to thank our technician, Adriano Vitali, and our coordinator, Jean-Charles Pozzolu, who made this broadcast possible, and all others who have made this broadcast possible, especially our media partners, Catholic TV, Catholic Faith Network, Shalom World Television's networks, EWTN, Salt and Light Media, Shalom TV in India, and Sunday Shalom. I'm Francesca Merlo.
And I'm Sister Bernadette.
Laudetur Jesus Christus.
Oh, you got it. Yeah, got it right there. Look.